Welcome to the Hoja on Architecture podcast. The Architecture of the Myth. Chapter 8, The Sacred Axis, Temple and Orientation. In the previous chapter, we explored the labyrinth as a space of disorientation, where architecture manipulates movement and perception. The labyrinth demonstrated that space can mislead, delay, and control without being immediately visible as a system of power. But if the labyrinth confuses direction, Greek temples do the opposite. They establish it. They fix orientation. They align space with something larger than the individual. In this chapter, we move from confusion to clarity, from strategy to order, and from wandering to alignment. This shift is not merely formal, but conceptual. It reflects a different understanding of how space should relate to human perception. Greek temples are not simply buildings. They are instruments of orientation. They do not exist as isolated objects placed randomly within the landscape. Instead, they are carefully positioned in relation to their surroundings, the sun, the terrain, and the sacred narratives they embody. A temple is less about enclosure and more about alignment. It frames relationships between the human, the natural, and the divine, translating abstract belief into spatial direction. In this sense, architecture becomes a medium through which invisible systems are made perceptible. Orientation in this sense becomes a form of knowledge. To stand within or before a temple is not only to occupy space, but to understand one's position within a larger order. The axis of the temple organizes this understanding. It directs the gaze, structures movement, and establishes a clear relationship between approach, entry, and focus. Unlike the labyrinth, where each turn destabilizes perception, the temple reduces ambiguity and reinforces clarity through spatial hierarchy. It tells you where to look, where to move, and how to interpret what you see. The approach to a temple is rarely accidental. Paths lead toward it, steps elevate the body, and the structure gradually reveals itself through controlled perspective. This sequence matters. Architecture here is not an instant experience but a process of arrival. One moves from the ordinary world toward a framed encounter with the sacred, guided by geometry and alignment rather than confusion or chance. The act of walking becomes part of the design, transforming movement into ritual. This process culminates in the axis, the invisible line that organizes the entire spatial experience. The axis is not always physically marked, yet it governs everything. It aligns the entrance with the interior with the altar, and the altar with the divine presence. The temple becomes legible because it is structured around this directional clarity. Space communicates not through complexity, but through precision. What is seen and what is hidden are carefully orchestrated along this line. Greek temples often engage with celestial orientation as well. The rising sun, seasonal light, and shifting shadows all interact with the structure in deliberate ways. In certain temples, the first light of dawn aligns with the entrance, illuminating the interior in a moment that is both architectural and symbolic. Light becomes a spatial material, revealing surfaces, defining edges, and marking time. The temple therefore operates not only as a static object but as a temporal device, synchronizing architecture with the rhythms of the natural world. In this sense, the sacred axis connects the earth to the cosmos. It transforms architecture into a mediator between different scales of existence. The individual stands within a constructed environment that simultaneously references the landscape and the sky, the present moment and cyclical time. Orientation becomes both physical and symbolic, grounding the human experience within a larger order. The temple does not isolate the individual, it situates them. This spatial clarity also produces a sense of authority, but unlike the vertical dominance of Olympus or the hidden control of the labyrinth, this authority is expressed through coherence. The temple does not impose itself through confusion or distance. It persuades through alignment. Everything appears to be in its right place. The experience feels inevitable, as though the structure could not have been otherwise. This sense of inevitability is precisely what gives the temple its quiet power. Such inevitability is, of course, carefully designed. The temple's proportions, its columns, its relationship to the ground plane, and its orientation within the landscape all contribute to this sense of order. The result is an architecture that appears natural even though it is highly constructed. The sacred axis hides its own artificiality by presenting itself as harmony. Design becomes invisible precisely when it is most effective. The idea of orientation extends beyond ancient temples. Many contemporary buildings continue to rely on axial organization. Government buildings, museums, and memorials often employ strong central axes to guide movement and reinforce meaning. Visitors are led toward focal points, important spaces are aligned with entrances, and circulation paths are structured to produce clarity rather than confusion. architecture continues to organize experience through direction even when its symbolic language changes. Even urban planning reflects this logic. Grand boulevards, ceremonial routes, and visual corridors align cities along symbolic lines. Capitals often center themselves around axes that connect political institutions, public spaces, and monuments. Paris, Washington, D.C., and Beijing all demonstrate how cities use alignment to project order and authority. These alignments create a sense of coherence that extends beyond individual buildings, shaping how entire urban environments are perceived and navigated. The sacred axis therefore persists as a fundamental spatial idea. It provides a counterpoint to the labyrinthine complexity of contemporary life. In a world filled with fragmented information, overlapping systems, and competing directions, the axis offers a moment of clarity. It tells us where to look, where to go, and how to understand our position within a larger structure. It reduces uncertainty by imposing a clear spatial narrative. This clarity, however, comes with its own implications. To orient is also to prioritize. The axis privileges certain directions, certain views, and certain experiences over others. What appears as order is also a form of selection. Architecture does not simply reveal the world, it frames it, and in framing, it inevitably excludes. To align space is to define meaning. Greek temples understood this deeply. They transformed belief into direction, ritual into movement, and landscape into ordered experience. The sacred axis was not merely a design tool, but a way of connecting human perception to a broader cosmological framework. Through alignment, architecture made the invisible legible, and legibility, in architecture, is a form of power. In the next chapter, we will move from alignment to creation, because if temples organize space through orientation, Greek mythology also offers another figure who shapes space through making. The story of Hephaestus introduces a different kind of architecture, one grounded not in alignment, but in craft, fire, and production. This concludes Chapter 8 of the Architecture of the Myth, the Sacred Axis, Temple, and Orientation. Thanks for listening. See you in the next episode.